Hey everyone, Max here. Right now I'm in the Lotus and heading to my parents' house here in southern Minnesota. It's a couple hours away from where I live in the cities, Minneapolis, I guess you guys might not be familiar with that term. And I'm about to do my first oil change on the car. It's been pretty cold, and so I haven't got a chance to do one yet since I bought it, and it's been a couple months, which is probably bad, but in all honesty, the oil, when I just check the dipstick, it's still perfectly clean, so I'm not too worried about it, other than the fact that it might be a little bit old, but you know, what can you do? So you might be kind of surprised, but this car fits some rhino ramps in it. And I don't have a thing to hold my camera, unfortunately, so that's that. The car is really amazing. It's, you know, every Lotus is unique, and they all have their own little quirks, their own little things, and it makes them kind of special in a way. You know, you hop in like a Honda Civic or something, and they're all pretty much the same, right? But every Lotus has its own little quirks and kinks and all of that, so it's kind of neat. And you know, I'm discovering more and more about this car, you know, with every day and every time I drive it. After owning it for a couple months, I put on, wow, I think right around 3,000 miles. In my first video, if you watched it, I say the mileage somewhere in there, it's like 17,000 something. And right now I have 20,270 miles. So right around 3,000. And by the end of today, when I drive back to from my parents' house back home, should be right about 3,000. So got a little experience in the car now. You know, when I drive the car, you really got to plan, because when you go somewhere, you gotta, if you're in a hurry, you don't want to take the Lotus, right? Or any exotic car. Because people run up to you, they want pictures, they want to find out about the car. You know, everything about it's not something you see every day, right? Especially here in Minnesota. One of the most common questions that I get, which is not something I really expected. I expected the question a little bit, but not to be like the number one question. But people generally, like, if they don't ask like what kind of car it is or how fast does it go or any of those things, it's generally how much or how much does it cost. That's what they say, and it's, you know, it's a $30,000 to $40,000 car, roughly, give or take a little bit, you know. But generally speaking, they're about $30,000 to $40,000 for an Elise. And I think some people might be a little bit let down by that when they hear that number. So it kind of bugs me that it's the number one question. I don't mind telling people how much I paid. I have no issue with that. It just, you know, it's like when you say like, oh, you can get one for like 30 to 40, and they're like, really? You know, like, they're kind of surprised because they're probably expecting me to say something like 200,000 or 300,000, because in all honesty, the people that ask that question, they probably don't know much about cars, right? They, you know, maybe they know enough to get around or whatever, but they probably don't know like the difference between a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, and a Lotus, right? So a lot of people, they might mistake this car for something higher end, like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or a Porsche. I've had that happen too. But when you say, you know, when you say that it's that much money, they kind of get taken back. And, you know, I've thought, well, I could always say like, you know, they run 55 to 60 brand new after delivery and fees and all that stuff, which is true. And, you know, I could say that, but that's not what I paid, right? But I don't know how to answer that question. If you guys have any suggestions, I'm open to hearing them. What was I gonna say? There's a lot of other questions that I get pretty regularly. You know, what kind of car is it? And that's a funny one, because I'll say it's a Lotus, and then they say, yeah, I know, but who makes it? And then I'm like, Lotus makes it. Lotus makes Lotus. And then I've had some people that get really confused because they still don't get it. And then I'm like, Lotus is the manufacturer of the car. They're like Ford, you know? And they're like, oh, really? Blah, blah, blah. And then I tell them about it, right? I think a lot of people just assume that Lotus is on the back and it's like, you know, you might have a Mustang and it says Mustang on the back or something. It doesn't say Ford. So maybe they're just assuming that it's the make. Or I'm sorry, the model, not the make, but the model of the vehicle. And so maybe they assume that it's like a Lamborghini Lotus, right? Doesn't make sense, but you know, that's what I get. So that's a common one. Other general things is just people coming up, shaking my hand, introducing themselves, and stuff like that. It's sorry, I cut myself off. You know, I don't want to sound cocky or brag or anything, but it really, and I hate to say it like this, but people treat you better. It really seems like that way anyway. You know, if I go to a restaurant and the server sees that I pull up in this, it seems like I get better service. And it's kind of a sad fact of this world, because you would think it shouldn't be that way, but it is. Maybe they just assume that I'm rich or something, and I'm not that rich. You know, I don't know, but it's just one of those things that happens, and for the better or the worse, that's just kind of how it is. As far as the car goes, really no issues. I had a scare with the radiator that might have a problem because it was smoking one day, but I actually traced it back to the fact that when you wash the car, the water sits on the radiator and it doesn't really evaporate, and so when you drive it after you've washed it, sorry, I'm hitting a city here, so I'm gonna pay attention to the road. One sec. People don't know how to do a four-way stop. People really don't know how to do a four-way stop. So, on that note, that's another thing, is when you're driving this car, people drive crazy around you. They drive like they're drunk, they drive, I don't know, they pay more attention to the car, the Lotus, than they do to the road sometimes. And so you kind of have to be extra cautious. Like in the situation I was just in, there was an SUV in front of me and we didn't have stop signs. I guess I was calling it a four-way stop, but a two-way. The other road did, and he was just kind of stopped in the middle of the road, right? Kind of weird. But you get situations like that all the time, where people kind of drive crazy. And now I kind of forgot what I was talking about before. Just pulling through a little tiny town here with like population like 600. Shout out to Blooming Prairie, Minnesota, right? Small towns are really, really fun to drive in, because even my parents' town, that's they got a population of like 30,000. Give them a shout out to Austin, Minnesota. They got a smaller population, but when you drive there, like everybody just stops and like takes pictures, and it's kind of fun. I don't know, I like it. And you know, don't ever buy a Lotus if you're not in for that. If you don't want attention or something like that, it's not the car for you. It's an awesome car, and you know, maybe it is the car for you, but you only should drive it on a track or something, right? And even then, I don't know, you might still get a lot of attention. Sorry, I forgot what I was talking about before. But yeah, the car is just really fun. It's a blast. I'm excited to see how the oil change goes. What else? Nice day here in Minnesota. It's March 11th or something like that. The radio still sucks. Don't buy a Lotus for the radio, right? That's not why I bought it, but when you go on a long trip, you know, I don't like sitting in silence, but oh man, it's crappy. You can't even it's not crappy in like, oh, the sound sounds bad. It's crappy in the respect that like, oh, I can't switch the station. And that's about all I have for now. The only thing Oh, I remember what I was talking about. The radiator. So the radiator had water on it, and the water steams off after you wash it if it's pretty cold out. And so I thought, because the radiator from Lotus is a weak point in the car, I'm gonna replace it, but I thought I was gonna have to go and spend the money right now, and I'm saving for a house. And you know, owning a Lotus and saving for a house is kind of hard. I have a wonderful fiance that helps. But yeah, so the radiator has plastic end caps that are just a weak point of the car. What can you do? So I'm gonna replace that hopefully this summer. The only other thing I've replaced is the windshield wiper. I got a Bosch Icon 24-inch something or other, and it just went right on there. So if you own a Lotus and you have to get a windshield wiper, get that. It's a wonderful one. Highly recommend it. And I have to go to the bathroom really bad, so I will talk to you guys later. Have a good one.